First of all, I'd just like to say thank you for joining me for this coffee morning with TechSPARK, and also a huge thanks to TechSPARK, Geraint and Shona, especially for facilitating and also helping with the content that I've created for Black History Month. Today, we'll be talking about diversity in tech, alternative routes into the sector. But before I get into that, I'm going to tell you a bit about me, and then I'll introduce my two panelists as well. So I'm Renee Jacobs. I'm the founder of Be in Bath, which is a network to support people from underrepresented backgrounds in the workplace. I started Be in Bath somewhere back in early lockdown with a focus on increasing representation and diversity in the world of work, particularly at senior levels. For Black History Month, I've teamed up with TechSPARK because in addition to running Be in Bath, I work full-time for Actual Experience, which is a software company in Bath, and I'm a project manager. I'm really passionate about everything to do with tech, and especially startups. So improving representation is a bit of a hot topic at the moment, but it's also something a lot of employers struggle with, especially in tech and digital. Today, with my two panelists, who you can hopefully see, Tracy and Glyn, we will be discussing whether, in order to improve representation within the technology and digital sectors, we need to look outside of traditional routes in. Innovation can come from anywhere, and those people with different or diverse life experiences can come up with new and creative ways of solving old and pre-existing problems. Their perspective on things that most of us take for granted or are comfortable to accept might be different, and so their solutions to the challenges solved by traditional and accepted technology might also be unique. So the question for today is, should we start to look outside of the computer science labs for the next generation of technology superstars? And how can we encourage people from non-tech backgrounds into the sector to explore their ideas? That is probably more than enough of me rambling on. So I'm going to introduce Glyn and Tracy properly. First of all, Glyn, can you tell us a bit about yourself, how you got into tech and what you do now?
Okay, hi, I'm Glyn Blaze, and I'm the founder of Northstar, which is a tech analytics platform for the recruitment and staffing industry. I was a pro sportsman back in the day, got injured, and needed to find a career. I fell into recruitment back in London and essentially worked my way up. Was director at a number of different organizations, then stepped out of that to do consultancy to small and medium-sized businesses, and realized that actually a lot of the problems that we potentially could solve through consultancy could be done through using tech and leaving that tech inside the businesses, which is kind of a grand idea. And fortunately for me, I met someone who was willing to invest in me and a bird-brained idea, and that's how I sort of fell into tech. Not really knowing very much about tech, but knowing that I can see a massive problem, I can see what could be a really good solution, but just needed to have the legs to run it, and someone just to have faith to invest in what, you know, it can often be quite a costly venture. So I fell into tech, and I've been in it now for, as founders, we're in our 5th year, and yeah, really enjoyed it, and really just committed to seeing people of all sorts of diverse backgrounds going into tech, and actually seeing that that's impacted the way that I view the world of tech. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Awesome. I really like that. I love people accidentally getting into the technology sector. And Tracy, can you tell us a bit about you as well and how you got into tech?
Well, hi everyone. I'm actually a perfect example of somebody who wasn't actually really techie at all, just getting into tech because I'm a musician, I'm an artist by trade, and that's literally all I did up until maybe like 5 to 7 years ago, when I became interested in crypto and blockchain. and this kind of new vision of the world and decentralization, and it was fascinating. And then I've been in the rabbit hole and doing all sorts of nonsense ever since. But you know, the thing is about tech is it's, you know, it's obviously a lot about innovation, and where the skills overlap is that, you know, it's about problem solving, and you need a lot of creativity. And that's where, you know, my artistic sensibilities and, you know, instinct and training really helps out, because, you know, you don't have to be an artist to be creative. There's, you know, problem solving and innovation, you know, kind of leans very heavily on creativity. So I think that's where you're, you know, you said, should the tech industry be looking outside of the computer world for the next big tech stars? And I will say overwhelmingly yes, you know, and that cross fertilization actually breeds and solves some very big problems. So yeah, I'm a great fan of it, and I think it's a necessity. I think it's a necessity. I think it's a necessity to look outside your typical networks, you know, because there's people like me.
I think that's really important, and I think that kind of how both of you are saying you accidentally got into tech, but you're also both then talking about solving a problem, which is, for me, what technology is all about. It's about solving these problems that we might have in the world and coming up with new ways to do that. And Tracy, that actually leads on really well to my next question, which is actually, is diversity in tech important? And why is it important? So Tracy, maybe you can start with that one.
Well, on a number of reasons, you know, the short answer is yes, but the data is kind of in to tell you that the more diverse your company is, the better it will perform. So therefore, you know, on the bottom line, you know, you're going to have a more successful company all around. It's not as simplistic as that, and there's caveats to that, and there's other things that you have to do. But essentially, you know, on a purely business sense, rather than, you know, an ethical sense, on a purely business sense, diversity is incredibly important. Also, yeah, you know, when the thing is, I'm looking at, so I'm a data researcher at the moment, and so I'm with the Southwest Creative Tech, and my research is into data markets and data rights and data literacy and all of this stuff. And at the moment, and also, you know, because of that research, it's kind of led me on to algorithmic bias and the bias in AI, and all of the ways and all of the stages in which kind of bias gets into it, because obviously computers are programmed by humans. No matter how smart the program, you know, the computer and the software is, you know, there has to be a human intervention initially. So, you know, if my kind of mantra is, if I want a tech world that looks like me, you know what I mean, and serves me, then, you know, people like me have to build it. And that's another reason why I think diversity is very important.
Awesome. Lynn, do you have anything you want to add on that one?
Yeah, I think similar to Tracy, that I think an overwhelming yes to diversity. I think where I've really seen it sort of firsthand is I used to do a number of talks about innovation and grassroots innovation. And one of the key things that I saw from a consultancy perspective going into tech was often what we are trying to do with technology is to solve an issue or solve a problem. Now, what helps us solve those problems is having people who are coming out of, I suppose, different boxes, coming together and having a different perspective on how we can actually solve those problems. So where we go in with our application to clients, we've got a very diverse team, both gender and also culturally. And what's been really interesting is that the staff in Moldova, where we have a large part of our actually development team, they have a very different vision of the world and very different experiences to us in the UK. And when we get together and we talk about a problem and we are whiteboarding, I'm always amazed at the angles, the innovation, the ways in which others look at problems versus how we look at problems, because I think we forget how conditioned we are by society. So when you end up having very diverse teams, whether that's straight in the development team or across your business, it means that when you sort of approach from a collaboration aspect, the answers to the problems which you come out with, which you would are vastly different to what you'd come out with if you had a homogenous group of individuals trying to solve those problems. But also, if you throw into the mix that you have people who are at the coalface of experiencing the problem, actually finding solutions to the problem, which is why things often don't go as they ought to go, because it's people who aren't experiencing the problem trying to solve the problem, as opposed to people experiencing the problem. This is always going to happen. My little daughter's just walked in. But this is how it all works out. And I think for my journey, in terms of when we go into clients as well, and we sort of implement our software, we often talk to them about having a top-down and a bottom-up approach to solving the problems of, we provide you with the data, but use the both ends of your business in order to find the solutions of how you are going to be more profitable, how you're going to get better productivity out of your staff, how you're going to look at a strategy of wellness and improvement.
Well,
so resoundingly, yes, diversity works.
I'm glad you agree with that. And as you can see, I've been joined by my cat, so we've all got our little family members joining us. That's his tail there that you can see. Yeah, so I really like that top-down and bottom-up approach. I think that I agree with you that a lot of the struggles that we have in implementing new technology could be down to a homogenous group designing them, but then also without going for the people who they're actually designed for, who it's going to solve problems for. You might not get buy-in on it. They might be, there's all those suspicions and things that people will have about what it's really for, and all of that. So I think that is super important. Okay, so I'm just going to move my cat. Sorry. So, and what I really like, and I was really keen to talk to Tracy and Glyn for this coffee morning, is because we all came into the tech world by accident. I'm not going to bore you all with my history, because it's not. I'm not a musician, and I'm not a professional sports person, and I never have been. I was an executive assistant. But what I am interested in talking about now is what we've learned along the way in our journey, and what in maybe perspectives or thoughts this has given us on how to increase diversity in the industry. If there are any barriers that people should be thinking about, and also what the opportunities are as well. So I would like to start with you, Glyn, for this one, please, if that's okay.
Yeah, what I would say in terms of things I've learned along the way, there's things that I did right which really helped me. So people going into tech or being in tech, having a mentor or someone who has walked the road ahead of you, or can provide you with information, having a sounding board, being able to talk through some of the challenges and the hurdles, or be able to talk about what your aims and your career goals are, what you want to do and how you want to do it. Having someone who's walked the road before you. I've always had that going into tech, and it's been absolutely brilliant. And I think if you end up going into an incubator or a scale up, often they provide those services to you. But if you're just on the starting out, try and find someone who can, just provide you with a real sounding board who's walked the path before. The other thing I've sort of learned as you go along is sometimes when we are looking at tech, or we're looking at roles and things, whether you're going the startup route or whether you're going the employed route, is sometimes we look at the entrance rather than the path. And I think the mistake we sometimes find is that I want this at this moment in time, but I'm not thinking about what I want in the next 2, 3, 5 years. And often we may settle for what is a 8 out of 10 position today, which actually will limit our greatness, shall we say, in future, because that organization is not moving in line with our ethics, our ethos, career development, all of those things. And I think learning that early on, that actually part of the way that we should rate what we do now needs to be in terms of where we want to be in the next 2, 3, 5 years. That's quite important. And I think one of the things that I'm seeing is I've done a lot of talks on like millennials coming into the workforce. One of the things that I've seen is that when I went into the workforce, you kind of accepted a job and accepted what you were told to do. Whereas now employees are coming in and they're asking why, what reason I'm doing this? Why am I? And I think that is such a powerful thing that's happening more and more now, where people are not just accepting that this is the way that the world is. It's like, why is it? And what is it? What's in it for me in terms of what I will get moving forward? So I would really say, ask those questions, create that sort of journey for yourself in terms of where you want to be, and work towards that journey. And I found that really interesting in terms of seeing something that I really want and then realizing that actually this has been great on day one, but there's always a day two, and trying to work out from there what you do.
Awesome. I really like that, actually. I have to say, I am so a little thing about me. I think I shocked and horrified Dave Page, the CEO of Actual Experience, when he was interviewing me to be his executive assistant, because he asked where I wanted to be in my career in 10 years. And I said, I want to be CEO of my own company. And he was like, ooh, nobody said that to me before. And I was like, got to be honest, I have a plan and I'm following it. So I think that's really important. And I also think if you play that back to employers, if you're thinking about jobs and vacancies and people that you're recruiting for, think about the skills and attributes that those people would have, maybe outside of what you would traditionally be thinking of. So we've all talked about creativity, problem solving, and like Tracy and Glenn both said, that can come from anywhere. That doesn't have to be from somebody that you would traditionally imagine in a tech role. Tracy, do you have any more thoughts about that?
Well, just thinking about my entrance into actually starting to build ideas, because I was looking at tech and into blockchain and stuff, but then when I had an idea that involved tech and I wanted to build like quite a big project and get a team, etc., I didn't really know where to go. So there's this whole process of, like, if you're really determined, you're just on the computer and looking for local contacts, etc. And I didn't even know that, there was already an existing lab with all the, resources that I needed literally on my doorstep, like literally. And, it took a good few weeks of searching and talking to people. And I just stumbled upon the Pervasive Media Studio. And I was amazed that there were just people there, creatives, technologists, and I could go there and have all of this support, and it was amazing. But and then I just started to think, well, why didn't I know about this? Thankfully now they're kind of doing a little bit more outreach, etc. But my thing, I think in terms of barriers and what people maybe need to do to increase diversity. I mean, I know the lab now has they have like inclusion officers and more programs to kind of bring in more diverse people. But in terms of like hiring in tech, they definitely need to check different kind of pools, because a major way that people kind of find jobs, etc., especially in tech, is through their kind of work in social circles. So if you're not even in tech, or you're in a different part of society, like you have all these ideas, but you're not necessarily around techie people or people who are like in those fields, you're already at a disadvantage, because it's like some of it's about who you know. So, you know, my kind of advice for tech recruiters maybe would be to change your methods, and, you know, don't wait for the candidates to come to you. You know, you might have to go into their spaces, you know, and it's kind of a bit more of outreach, I suppose, and widening your circles, using people from different communities and asking their opinions. You know, there's like a whole raft of things that you could do, to be honest with you. And like the barriers, I suppose, for people, you know, thinking about myself when I first came in and actually tried to build stuff, you know, it can be probably a bit intimidating, and maybe a bit of an imposter syndrome, like you're not supposed to be there because, you know, you're not techie and you don't look like anyone here, and it's all a bit, you know. So it's probably kind of like breaking down those barriers of perception as well. And that's another reason why maybe tech outreach for recruiters may be a good idea, because then, you know, you've got a bit more of a public facing aspect to it, and other people might feel like, oh, okay, it's not so scary. And I actually looked at a question, because I'm kind of like interested in what people are writing as we're kind of like talking. And on the stage thing, John's what's the relative importance of mentors versus role models, which I thought was quite a good question.
Yeah.
So are we going to answer some of these?
We are. You know, we're definitely going to go into the questions.
Cool. So I probably won't go. Okay, I won't go into that either. But yeah, so that's just some of my thoughts on how we can make it a little bit more accessible for people who just don't really have the knowledge, or, you know, the kind of confidence to.
Can I just throw one little thing spaces in there? I don't know. I worked with a girl called Esther O'Callaghan. She was the youngest MBE in the UK, and she has a charity called Thrive, and has just launched Hundo Careers, and that is looking at providing apprenticeships for businesses, employers, but taking them from really, really diverse backgrounds. And often what they've done is that they've realized that often a lot of the sort of BAME children who are leaving school have not necessarily been exposed to the whole tech industry. And what they've done is they've really sort of created this vehicle to take this group of individuals who are sort of 18 plus years old, with all of the aptitude and none of the skills, and actually place them in the organizations who are able to train them in the skills but are desperate for that aptitude. And they're they're doing they've got some really interesting stats about, you know, the number of placements that they're making from you know, different cultural, gender, ethnicity backgrounds, that they're placing with like very, very large businesses who otherwise would be writing adverts and using all of the traditional methods to recruit staff, and actually just finding those employable people who are from one sector of society. And then one thing I'd just say as an employer, I have found that aptitude over skills is just key. So often you cannot train aptitude you can't train aptitude into anyone, but you can train most people in skills. So if you get the right aptitude and you train the skills, you end up with a really, really, really well-balanced and well-rounded workforce.
Yeah. Oh, I'm totally here for that. I am a huge proponent of writing your social network, which is what Be in Bath is all about, and your work network. But I'm not going to talk to you about that, because there's been some really great discussions in the chat, which I'm going to dive into. Just because it's linked to what Glyn was saying, I'm going to go with Z's question first, which says, I attended a chat once where they discussed the pipeline was what needed fixing, rather than just getting employers to look at diversity in recruitment. If diverse people aren't encouraged to go down the tech route, then by the time employers are looking for staff, the numbers are really low. And then Z says, Glyn, what are your thoughts on that? So it'd be cool to hear what you think about that, Glyn, and then we'll go back to John's question about role models.
Yeah, so interestingly, when you look at the stats of the next 10 years, the roles that we are most organizations are recruiting for now, the roles that they will need in the next 10 years, have not, some of those job titles haven't even come into existence now. The whole thing in terms of balancing a pipeline, I think it's a two-pronged approach. I think Tracy made a really good point earlier on that the stats are out, and I think you can basically go. McKinsey have done a number of studies. The Prince's Trust have done a number of studies in terms of how diverse workplaces, from a financial perspective, from an innovation perspective, it stands to reason that those are the best performing organizations. But I think with a commitment to looking and saying, right, okay, we know that the result of having a diverse workforce gives our stakeholders the benefits that they want. What tools, avenues, and routes are we going to take in order to find those people? And I think it's not just a D&I thing, like have we got enough, have we got gender balance, or have we got enough black people in the organization? I think it's a real thing saying, okay, if we're going to do this, how do we do this strategically, and how do we make sure that the ways in which we are attracting employees is correct? So just going down to ZipRecruiter did some really interesting research on the ways that job adverts are written, and how often, from, let's say, if we look at gender, how often certain senior roles were written in a way which actually stopped 70% of women applying for those jobs because of the language which was being used. Or how, where there is a gap in, let's say, for instance, cultural diversity, how actually the way in which people from certain cultures will read an advert precludes them from they are worthy, so to speak, to apply for those roles. So if we start to understand those as organizations, I think the pipeline, so to speak, as you talk about it, we will start to create paths and gateways for people to become engaged in our organizations, rather than just continuing to use the more traditional routes and saying, it's not working. Actually, I need a black person, or I need a woman. That's not the way to go. It's actually saying, right, okay, we are committed to this strategically. How do we change the way in which we speak, or how do we have different channels of communication so that everyone who we want to encourage, we want to attract, actually feels that they're brought into the pool of being able to communicate with us as an organization?
Yeah, I totally love that. Tracy, have you got anything you want to add on this?
Yeah. No, I mean that basically just echoes my point, where I just said, the whole methodology of how you attract people, diverse people, has to change, because obviously the status quo isn't working. And this whole idea of just getting an inclusion officer and that will do it is not, that's great in and of itself for the organization, but like there's a lot more steps involved, and a lot more of a holistic approach involved, which you cannot do unless you get out into the community and target the people and meet the people who you want to actually attract.
I really love what Glenn was saying about making it strategic priority, rather than however else you might do it. I won't use any negative words for that, but I think that's really important. I think it needs to be something that companies actively, the employers actively decided to do, and it's got support by management, support at the C level, support at the board level. These are conversations that are really important, and without the right emphasis and drive behind them, it's just not going to happen, because you're changing how companies recruit and how they actually work and talk about themselves, and all of that is something that needs to be considered. I promised John I would go to his question about what's the relative importance of mentors versus role models. So let's go for that one, Tracy.
Yeah, no, because I was looking at John's other comment, and he said, absolutely, the support needs to start at primary school or before, which basically, he's kind of making a really good point of like, yes, we need to get out and attract, but we also need to widen the range and start a bit earlier, and really create this perception that like the tech world is inviting and it is for you. But sorry, yes. So the mentor question.
What's
the difference?
Lost it.
Where is it?
You guys are chatting loads. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the relative importance of mentors versus role models? I think, essentially a mentor is somebody who is a lot more involved directly in your process of growing. There's a direct relationship. So if I have a mentor, we will kind of like define what our relationship and how they can help me and I can help them, because it's always about how you can also bring, as the mentee, how you can also bring value to the relationship, because this person with the experience is, giving up their time, kindly transferring some, imparting some of their knowledge and experience. And it's really important not to see it as just like a one-way transaction, because you might be able to, help them, or maybe educate them on something as well. So the main difference, I suppose, is like a role model is someone you might get inspiration from, someone you might admire, and you might look at their kind of trajectory or career path and say, oh, they did it like that. I can, they did this, and maybe I can do that. So there's some sort of, kind of secondhand experience or inspiration that you can get from a role model. But, a mentor is a much more deeper and probably more effective way of helping someone get to their kind of next goal in life.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that role models are kind of maybe your I don't know, North Star or something that you're looking at, but a mentor's there maybe to help you more on a daily basis, or when you need that support. Glyn, do you have any more thoughts about that one?
Yeah, I'll just break it down into two things. I'd say, like, if you looked at it like vision and mission, like the mentor, the role model is like the vision of what it looks like to be in the position that you want to be, or what it looks like to be at the destination. And we need role models because it helps us project ourselves forward to what the end game looks like. But then in terms of a mentor, imagine that's the mission. Like, how do we get from A to B? What do we need to do? How do we get around the hurdles in the road? What do we need to think about? And that's where a mentor is like your guide on the mission. And, they know where you're going, and they're helping you as you go along to navigate, to work out, well, if there's a boulder in the road, how do I climb over it? Do I go around it? Do I try and push it? And that's where it's slightly different. But you always keep the role model as the vision of what does the destination look like? What does it look like to walk on the moon? But then you always have to have your mission of how do I get to the moon?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of thinking about it. Right, we've got another question. This is really important, actually. And I think this is a really deep question, so we might be talking about this forever, but we'll try. How do people see lockdowns and the move to online in affecting diversity in tech? This is a question from Mark, and he says, I've found that, as an example, the networking on platforms like this, connecting to random people, means I end up chatting to a more diverse group of people than I naturally would in person. And then John just adds that obviously there are issues to do with internet access, etc., which would make digital exclusion and poverty a barrier for some people. But let's have some quick thoughts on this one. Glyn, why don't you go first?
In many respects, I think lockdown, if we kind of like push, we know there's been a lot of negatives with regards to lockdown and everything that's going on with the pandemic. But I think in certain respects, it has been a real leveler, because from an organizational and corporate perspective, where there was often this people working from home, this kind of like aversion to people not working in an office, I think this has shown actually that in terms of productivity, and the numbers are still coming out, in terms of how people work, we are a lot more open to saying, right, we need the work to be done, because there isn't actually the option in a lot of the circumstances for a complete workforce to be in the office. It opens the ground up for people to be judged based on the quality of their work and the ability to work, as opposed to some of the unconscious biases which would often be seen and felt in the workplace. This is a journey for all of us, I think, and we're not where we need to be, and we're not where we will be. But I do think, though, that a lot of barriers have been broken down in terms of people realizing that actually this sort of anonymization, shall we say, of who people are, but actually really being able to go, well, that person can do a good job, or that person is right. And this is, I think, Tracy will be able to talk about, sort of blockchain in the future, where it will just be down to how you have fulfilled the different tasks that you've done in the past. I just think that we're on track to something which could actually break down a lot of barriers by accident, because people need the work to be done, and it can be done from anywhere at any time, versus being done in 9 to 5 in an office, which means that for the gig economy, which means for people working from home, being able to have more flexible timescales. So therefore, if like I'm a single parent and being in the office has precluded me from certain things, but actually now, because I can work to my own timescale, because there aren't these barriers and parameters, and I can do work in a different way, actually there's a real positive which I think we can harness from lockdown. But yes, there are certain negatives or challenges with regard to poverty, digital exclusion, and the like, that we have to navigate as we go through this.
Tracy, do you have any more thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that point, that material, practical point of internet access, and digital exclusion, that is a major thing to get done, really, like a major goal of inclusion, because that is one of the major barriers. So if we can get that done, and have that as a part of the plan, so we have the whole, change the pipeline and all of that over here, and access the community over here. But that, at the very beginning, there's the practical solutions of, like, if people can't even get online, or if people, haven't actually got any hardware, they can't afford the hardware, how do they, how is that a fair level playing field, so but I'm also one of those people that actually think that lockdown, for me anyway, has been quite positive. I mean, I've thrived in lockdown. I mean, just the future of, obviously the future of work has changed. We are never going back. This is it. There is going to be more remote working. It's just like, and it's actually been quite good for some people. Some people, obviously, it's not been so good. But this whole, before, a lot of people wanted to work from home and do flexible working and all of that stuff, and their employers said, well, actually, no, we can't. It's not very, we can't do it for the business, etc., etc. And then all of a sudden, everyone had to do it, and now workers are like demanding. Their employers are saying, well, how do you want this to go out of lockdown? And the majority of employers are going, actually, we want to stay in a remote working kind of capacity, so like it's kind of giving people more choice, and also, like, I'm still building projects, and my team is across the world, and obviously without technology, without remote working, we actually couldn't do it. But that is actually the norm now, and I like the way people have said that actually it's widened their social circles. It means they've talked to more diverse people. There is a certain amount of Zoom fatigue. That's obviously, because I'm literally on Zoom. I'm doing conferences, courses, everything online at the moment. But overwhelmingly, it's positive.
I think Steve makes a point. Steve Harries makes a really good point about it needs to start at home. And he talks about needing to have high quality broadband for all, and like starting with children. And I think this is where I think the pandemic has provided a mass social study. It's what do we do as a result of it, knowing what we know now? Because I think people were able to cite studies of how productivity reduced when people were remote work. You know, there were just like little pockets which people used to support these ideas that remote working didn't work and this and that. We've been forced into this new world. And the key thing for organizations and us is to push and say, right, okay, if we know that this works, if we know remote working works, if we know that from a social interaction point of view, there's more diverse learning, we can give access to children. If therefore that gets pushed through, and let's say the governmental bodies, local authorities are then thinking, right, okay, how do we create this environment where we can get around the issue of poverty and of digital poverty? I think the next few years are going to be really, really interesting, just even from a grassroots innovation perspective, because, you know, people will have access a lot earlier to start problem solving, getting involved in things that they wouldn't have before, just because of the way the world worked.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. But I would say this is where these types of innovations that we're talking about, that I'm sure people are already working on and thinking about, is where having a diverse workforce is super important, because it's totally possible that people who are from poorer backgrounds or, you know, working class will get left behind in these innovations if they aren't being considered, if their thoughts, their input is being either ignored or just not even thought about in the minds of the people that are developing these things. So this is where it's super important when we're thinking about world-changing, potentially technology type things, which is what this really is to get that diversity, and that's where the importance really comes in. Oh, what an amazing stat from Jane there. 65% of primary school children will be doing jobs which haven't been invented yet. That's amazing. So she says it's about encouraging our young people developing skills, creativity, problem solving, innovation, curiosity outside of the curriculum, and introducing a greater understanding of the impact of tech and its potentials. She says, I work with 95 secondary schools / colleagues, mainstream and alternative provisions, and would love to get more tech there for diversity. That is so, I mean, I suppose that is true. That is a shocking, shocking figure. It's jobs that we can't even imagine. I think, you know, when I've got a 2-year-old and thinking about what she's probably going to start learning in school might be completely irrelevant to her future job, as people probably discovered. And then John says 12% of young people don't have internet access at home. That's from the ONS survey. So that's another really shocking stat. I'm sure there's someone who's good at maths there could do to work out what that means for those 65% of primary school children. Who are the children that will be getting the most amazing futuristic jobs, and who are the ones that are going to be left behind because they don't have something as basic as internet access, which we all really take for granted, I think. Right, I think I've gone through all of the questions in the chat. If I've missed a question, just post it again. If there are any more questions, you can post them as well. While waiting for that, I'm going to see if Glenn or Tracy have any more thoughts that they want to add. I haven't asked.
Not necessarily, but it's all about my philosophy, and my kind of mantra is like, you know, I love talking. Talking's great, and we need to converse, and we need to, you know, dissect ideas, etc., etc. But then I'm all about action. When we've talked, I'm like, then what do we do? You know, so like as a kind of result of my kind of research and stuff, I've set up an inclusive technology network. You know, I could, and just because it's, I just wanted somewhere where people can like kind of come, share ideas, talk about, you know, actual action, you know. So like, say for example, Jane says she wants to have more tech in her school environment, you know what I mean? Maybe we can talk about that. Maybe we can talk about going in, designing a little program together. Who knows, you know? But it's just I've had quite a good response with it, you know. And Hema Phillimore, she's a professor in robotics at UWE. She actually hit me up before I did that control shift event And I was able to kind of like go through some things for her to do with like AI and bias. And now she's added the AI and bias section into her course, and students in University of Bristol will be learning this from now on. You know, and that was literally a few conversations over a week. Boom, it was straight in the course, and now they're off. And it's those sort of interventions, it's those sort of conversations, like things can happen really quickly, you know. So I'm gonna put my link, the Inclusive Technologies Network link up there in a second. And you know, please just like hit me up, ideas. I'm literally swamped with work, but I always find time to do something because I don't sleep much, so that's good. Yeah, so please, you know, let's carry on the conversation.
Yes, I totally agree with what Tracy said. I think that conversation is great, action is even better. And to share the spamming of links with you, for any of you who are based in Bath or the southwest that's not Bristol, or even if you're in Bristol, I'm not going to say no. Like I said at the beginning, I run Be in Bath, which is a network for people from underrepresented backgrounds in the workplace. In addition to working with individuals who have jobs or students, I also work with employers to look at different ways that you can support your workforces. So I'll put my link to my website there, and you can just drop me an email or whatever anytime. And like Tracy, I'm super busy. I have a full-time job. I have a second job. I have a 2-year-old. But I'm so excited about this. I will get back to you almost immediately. So that's my little plug. Glenn, is there anything else you want to add?
I would just say that sometimes when we're talking about these issues and just reading through the comments, they seem so big, and it seems like in order for society, business, tech to change, it's like turning a barge. But I just wonder, all of us will be thrown opportunities to just do little things along the way, whether that is, you know, speaking to a school event about tech, or speaking to young kids from BAME backgrounds about communication, or whether that's lobbying the government on certain things. I think if enough of us just do the little things, you know, if we have this conversation and enough people are ignited into just doing something, I think then we will actually see the change happen. And it's not just about being enlightened, like Tracy's saying, it's about what happens next. So I kind of feel like if we could all just do something or speak to someone, then we can create this wave, which will mean that actually these children in a few years' time, that there will be policies, government policies and things to make sure that every child has access to X. And we could look back and go, well, some of this started because loads of people in loads of different places around the country were having similar conversations, and actually it became a big wave of lobbying government. Or when it comes to boards of businesses being more strategic in terms of understanding how beneficial having more diverse workforces are, and saying, right, it's not, D&I is just the tip of the iceberg, but actually how's it become part of our DNA in terms of looking and saying, we know that it works, and actually it enriches each person within the organization. And if enough people have those conversations in their businesses and at the times, then what will the workforce look like in a few years? And I think sometimes it looks like a massive wall that we've got to climb, but if enough of us do our little bit, we can knock down these walls, and we can actually really make big change to business, big and small, as time goes on.
Definitely. And I've just seen we've got another.
Well done, Glenn. Well done.
That was good. We've got another little question, another big question, should I say, from Nikki. And they say, I know this is about diversity in tech and alternative routes into the sector, but I wondered if you had any thoughts about inclusion once we've managed to create a diverse workforce. Do you have any ideas to ensure we maintain a diverse workforce in the business and ensure everyone feels included? That is a huge question and very important. Glyn, do you have any thoughts on that one?
I think it's the second step after bringing people into the organization. I think what we have to understand is that you know, when you do your unconscious bias, so if you've been in an organization where they talk about unconscious bias, and you start to realize that actually, in order for us to be an inclusive organization, we have to understand ourselves and have to understand our blind spots and have to understand that actually, whoever we are, we've been shaped by the environment that we're in. So yes, it's great attracting people, but I think from an understanding point of view, understanding who we are and how we may treat those people and trying to encourage an organization to be a learning organization will be one of those key things which is able to, keep people in the organization and actually develop their careers in the right way, because we're starting to understand ourselves, and in tandem with that, start to understand different people, different cultures, different genders, all of that. And I think learning organizations will be able to do that. And it's about not patting yourself on the back because you've got 50-50 gender and you've got whatever it is in terms of different cultures, but starting to say, right, okay, what's the next step? What does this mean for us? Where are my blind spots? How am I treating people from different backgrounds and things like that? And how am I working towards making sure that I understand what they need to perform well in this organization or the next organization that they go to?
Tracy, do you have any more thoughts on that? I know that's a huge topic.
Yeah, I mean, it just ties in with what Bloom was saying about strategic planning. So it's great, to have an action point, a call to action, and we do something. But Nikki's point is how do we keep that going? How do we continue, and how do we maintain? And that literally is just part of the plan. If there is a strategic plan and it's not just like all sporadic ad hoc actions everywhere, if you do have a strategic plan, you will program that continuation into it, because that is a necessary part of progress. You can't just do one action and as Glenn said, pat yourself on the back and then it's a done deal. It is a continuous practice. These things need nurturing, communities need to grow, ideas need to ferment, things need to change, and it does not happen overnight. And if there's not a constant, if there's not constant work going on, then you are not attending the garden, and then things can go awry. So Nikki made is very, very important, that we need to have that continuation and maintenance in the actual strategy.
Awesome. Cool. I have absolutely loved this discussion. I've basically been sitting here going, yes, but I've not done that with my arms because that would be distracting for everybody. This has been a really great chat. Are there any more questions? Otherwise, I think we're supposed to go into networking or something. I'm going to apologise in advance and say I can't join the networking because I have to pick up my daughter from nursery. But if you want to talk to me separately, you can add me on LinkedIn or email me via my website. But are there any more questions in the meantime? I'm only going to wait a couple of seconds, so you're going to have to be a fast typer. Cool. Tracy and Glyn, do you have any closing thoughts before we somehow magically go into networking?
No, I just want to say thank you everybody for being here. It's been super interesting. You've put in some great links. Yeah,
I second that. Let's keep the energy going.
Thanks everyone.
Yeah, I have really loved this. It's been awesome. So thank you everybody for joining us. And please do hit up Tracy and myself via those links, and hopefully we can keep the conversation going and also get some action going as well. A good question. Will there be more of these? I've organised this with TechSPARK. I think I've really loved this discussion, so I'll catch up with them after, and hopefully we can maybe organise some continuing and follow-up discussions, because there were some really good questions raised that would be worth discussing in more detail. And maybe we can even, I'm signing TechSPARK up for things I don't know about now, maybe we can even work to drawing together some kind of action plans for the region. I'm so excited. That would be awesome from my opinion, but I will discuss it with the guys at TechSPARK and we will let you know what more you can expect from us, but I would definitely love to do more of this. Cool. So yes, thank you very much, everybody. And I don't know how we go to that website. I don't know how this works. Somebody who knows what they're doing might tell us what to do.
Hello, can you see me?
Yes.
So you can just click on, we'll stop broadcasting in a minute. Thank you guys and gals for just a really great discussion. It's been really great to see all the people getting involved in the chat. I think sometimes we can talk about quite dry topics that doesn't necessarily elicit the same sort of passion for discussion. So it's really nice to see. So yeah, if people want to go and mingle and carry on talking, they can do that just by pressing the networking button on the left-hand side of their hopping screen. And also do check out the series of articles that Renee has put together for Black History Month on TechSPARK.co. Thank you very much, everyone. I think we'll just say goodbye now.